Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the UES Defender, staring at the large screen that showed the galaxy map. Every single star system belonging to the Galactic Alliance was glowing bright red. Red meant rejected. Red meant unwanted. Red meant that humanity had been turned away by every civilized species in the galaxy. The message from the Galactic Council had arrived 3 hours ago. Jake had read it 5 times, hoping the words would somehow change. They did not. The Council had made their decision clear. Humans were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable to join the peaceful races that ruled the stars. Commander Lisa. Grant walked up beside him, holding a datapad in her hands. Her face looked tired and sad. She had spent the last 6 months trying to make contact with alien races. She had sent thousands of messages offering friendship, trade, and peace. Every single one had been ignored or rejected. Captain, I have the full report from all our diplomatic missions, Lisa said quietly. It's not good news. Jake turned to face her. Lisa was one of the best officers he had ever worked with. If she looked defeated, then things were really bad. Tell me everything, Jake said. Lisa looked at her datapad and began reading. The Zalari were the first to respond. They called us barbaric, warmongering primitives. They said our history shows we solve every problem with violence and destruction. Jake felt his stomach drop. The Zalari were supposed to be the most open-minded race in the galaxy. If they rejected humans, everyone else would follow. The Korthan Empire was even worse, Lisa continued. They said we are a species that brings death wherever we go. They think we would corrupt their peaceful way of life. What about the Narathi? Jake asked. They're scientists like us. Surely they understood our peaceful intentions. Lisa shook her head. The Narathi studied our entire history for 2 months. They concluded that humans are genetically programmed for violence. They said we have fought more wars in our short history than most species fight in 1,000 years. Jake walked over to the large window that showed the stars outside. Somewhere out there, hundreds of alien civilizations were living their lives, trading with each other, sharing knowledge and culture. None of them wanted anything to do with humanity. Admiral Ben Clark had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. He had assembled the best team Earth could offer. Scientists, diplomats, linguists, cultural experts, and peacekeepers. Dr. Amy Turner, their lead expert on alien biology, had studied every available piece of information about galactic species. She had learned their languages, their customs, and their values. It had all been for nothing. The communication system beeped. Jake pressed a button, and Admiral Clark's face appeared on the screen. The Admiral looked like he had aged 10 years in the past few hours. Captain Morrison, I need you to return to Earth immediately. We're calling back all diplomatic ships. Admiral, what about the other missions? Captain Stone is still trying to reach the Vorthon Republic. Captain Martinez might have better luck with the smaller colonies. Admiral Clark shook his head. It's over, Jake. Captain Stone reported this morning that the Vorthon Republic has closed their borders to all human ships. Captain Martinez was turned away by 3 different species before he even got close to their space. Jake felt anger building in his chest. Sir, we came in peace. We offered them our friendship, our knowledge, our help. We could have made the galaxy a better place together. I know, son, but they've made up their minds. They see us as a threat, not as potential allies. Lisa stepped forward. Admiral, what about the smaller species? The ones that aren't part of the main council? Maybe they would be more willing to listen? We tried that too, Commander. Even the peaceful farming communities want nothing to do with us. Word has spread across the galaxy. Humanity is considered a dangerous species that should be avoided at all costs. The screen went dark. Jake and Lisa stood in silence for several minutes. Outside the window, the stars looked the same, as always. Beautiful and distant. But now they felt cold and unwelcoming. Back on Earth, the news was spreading quickly. Captain Rick Stone, stationed at the Titan Naval Base, watched as his crew gathered around communication screens. They were reading reports from news stations across human space. Every colony, every space station, every settlement was talking about the same thing. Humanity was alone, The reactions were mixed. Some people were angry. They wanted to show the aliens that humans could be just as advanced and peaceful as any other species. Others were sad. They had dreamed of joining a galactic community, of learning from alien cultures and sharing their own knowledge. But many people were afraid. If every alien species thought humans were dangerous, what did that say about humanity? Were they right? Were humans really too violent to live alongside other civilizations? Dr. Amy Turner sat in her laboratory on the research station orbiting Mars. She had spent years studying alien cultures. She knew their art, their music, their philosophy. She had learned to appreciate their different ways of thinking and living. She had genuinely believed that humans and aliens could be friends. Now she stared at the rejection letters on her desk. Each one was written in a different alien language, but they all said the same thing. Humans were not welcome. Humans were too dangerous. Humans should stay in their own corner of the galaxy and leave civilized species alone. Amy picked up one of the letters from the Narathi Science Council. She had spent months learning their complex language. She had studied their advanced mathematics and physics. She had hoped to share human discoveries in quantum mechanics and genetic engineering. The Narathi had the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. Together, they could have cured diseases and extended life for countless beings. But the letter was clear. The Narathi believed that human scientific knowledge would be used for warfare. They pointed to human history as evidence: nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical weapons. Every major human scientific discovery had been turned into a tool of destruction. Amy threw the letter across the room. It was not fair. Yes, humans had fought wars. Yes, they had made weapons. But they had also made beautiful art, composed wonderful music, and written inspiring literature. They had built hospitals, schools, and libraries. They had sent aid to disaster victims and protected the weak and innocent. The communication system in Amy's lab beeped. She pressed a button and saw the face of her colleague, Dr. Chris Bennett, on the screen. Chris was Earth's leading expert on space physics. He had been working on new propulsion systems that could help humans explore the galaxy faster and safer. "Amy, have you seen the news from the outer colonies?" Chris asked. "Which news? Everything is bad news today." "There are protests on Mars. People are demanding that Earth's government do something. They want us to prove that humans deserve to be part of the galactic community." Amy sighed. "What can we do, Chris? We offered them everything: peace, friendship, knowledge, trade. They don't want any of it." "Maybe we're trying too hard to be like them," Chris said. "Maybe we should just focus on being ourselves, build our own civilization, explore space on our own terms, and stay isolated forever, never meet other species, never learn from their knowledge and culture." Chris was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, Amy. I just know that begging for acceptance isn't working." The communication ended. Amy looked out the window of her laboratory. Earth was visible in the distance, a beautiful blue and green planet full of life and hope. Humanity had built an amazing civilization on that planet. They had overcome war, disease, poverty, and environmental destruction. They had learned to work together and care for each other. But apparently none of that mattered to the species that ruled the galaxy. They only saw the violence and conflict in human history. They refused to see the growth, the progress, and the potential for peace. Amy made a decision. She would continue her research. She would keep learning about alien cultures even if they rejected her efforts. Someday maybe the galaxy would change its mind about humanity. Until then, humans would have to prove themselves worthy of acceptance. The rejection was complete. Every major species in the galaxy had spoken. Humanity was to remain isolated, watched from a distance, and treated as a dangerous element that needed to be contained. The dream of joining a peaceful galactic community was over. But Jake Morrison, Lisa Grant, Amy Turner, and millions of other humans were not ready to give up hope. They would continue to reach for the stars, even if the stars seemed to be reaching away from them. 3 months had passed since the galaxy rejected humanity. The pain of that rejection was still fresh, but humans were trying to move forward. They focused on building their own colonies and exploring the empty systems near Earth. If the galaxy did not want them, they would make their own path among the stars. Chief Science Officer Karen Walsh was working the night shift at Luna Observatory when her equipment started showing something impossible. The deep space sensors were picking up massive energy signatures moving through the dark void between galaxies. At first, Karen thought her equipment was broken. Nothing was supposed to be out there in the empty space between star systems. She checked her instruments 3 times. The readings were correct. Something huge was moving toward the Milky Way galaxy. Not just one object, but dozens of them. Each one was larger than a moon and generating more energy than most stars. Karen called her supervisor immediately. Within an hour, every major observatory in human space was pointing their telescopes toward the same area of dark space. The readings were the same everywhere. Unknown objects were approaching the galaxy at incredible speed. Commander Paul Martinez was leading a routine patrol mission aboard the UES Horizon when his ship detected one of the mysterious objects. Paul had been exploring the outer edge of human space, mapping new systems for future colonies. His crew was used to finding empty planets and dead asteroids. They were not prepared for what they found. The object appeared on their sensors as a massive organic shape. It looked like a living creature, but it was the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered in what looked like tentacles or roots. Dark energy pulsed through its body like blood flowing through veins. Paul ordered his ship to maintain a safe distance while they studied the creature. His science officer, Dr. Nancy Price, ran every scan they had. The results were disturbing. The creature was not just alive, it was actively consuming matter and energy from everything around it. Small asteroids were being pulled into its tentacles and dissolved completely. "Captain, this thing is eating everything it touches," Dr. Price reported. "It's converting solid matter into some kind of dark energy that feeds back into its body." Paul watched through the main screen as the creature moved toward a small asteroid field. Within minutes, hundreds of rocks that had existed for billions of years were gone. The creature had grown slightly larger. "Can it detect us?" Paul asked. Dr. Price checked her instruments. "I don't think so, sir. We're too small and we're not putting out much energy. But if we get closer or use our engines too much, it might notice us." Paul made a difficult decision. He ordered his crew to power down all non-essential systems and drift silently while they observed the creature. They needed to learn as much as possible about this new threat. For 6 hours they watched the creature feed. It moved with purpose, not randomly. It seemed to be following some kind of path through space, consuming everything in its way. When it finished eating all the asteroids in the area, it extended long tentacles into space and used them to pull itself toward the next source of matter. Back on Earth, Admiral Sandra Hayes was reading the first reports from Commander Martinez's mission. The news was terrifying. The creatures, which human scientists were now calling devourers, were heading straight for the galaxy. Based on their current speed and direction, they would reach the outer systems within 18 months. Admiral Hayes called an emergency meeting of Earth's top military and scientific leaders. The conference room was packed with worried faces. Everyone had read the reports. Everyone understood what this meant. Dr. Chris Bennett, Earth's leading expert on space physics, stood up to address the group. "Based on our analysis of the sensor data, these creatures are unlike anything we've ever seen. They appear to be biomechanical constructs, part living organism and part machine. Their ability to convert matter into energy is beyond our current understanding of physics." "How many of them are there?" Admiral Hayes asked. "We've detected at least 40 separate entities so far. They're spread out across a wide area, but they're all moving in the same general direction, toward the center of our galaxy." Captain Rick Stone, who had been recalled from Titan Base for the emergency meeting, raised his hand. "What happens when they reach inhabited systems? What happens when they encounter the alien civilizations?" Dr. Bennett's expression grew darker. "Based on what we've observed, they consume everything. Planets, ships, space stations, living beings. Everything gets converted into energy that makes them stronger and larger." The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. The galaxy that had rejected humanity was about to face a threat that could destroy all life. Dr. Amy Turner, who had been quietly studying the data, finally spoke up. There's something else we need to consider. These creatures seem to be attracted to areas with high energy output. Developed civilizations with lots of technology would be like bright lights attracting moths. You mean they're specifically hunting? Advanced species? Admiral Hayes asked. That's what the data suggests. They ignore empty systems and dead planets, but they move toward areas with artificial energy sources. The more advanced a civilization, the more attractive it becomes as a target. Captain Jennifer Ross, who commanded a stealth reconnaissance ship, had been listening carefully to the discussion. Admiral, we need to get word to the galactic civilizations. They need to know what's coming. Admiral Hayes looked around the room. Those same civilizations that called us barbaric, warmongering primitives? The ones that refused to even listen to our offers of friendship? Yes, ma'am. Even if they rejected us, we can't just let them be destroyed without warning them. Several officers in the room disagreed. Captain Tony Mitchell spoke for many of them when he said, "Why should we help species that treated us like dangerous animals? Maybe this is their problem to solve." Dr. Amy Turner stood up, her voice firm and clear. "Because that's not who we are. We don't let innocent people die just because they were unfair to us. If we did that, we would prove that they were right to reject us." The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humanity should focus on defending itself and let the aliens deal with their own problems. Others believed that warning the galaxy was the right thing to do, regardless of how humans had been treated. Meanwhile, more reports were coming in from deep space monitoring stations. Captain Steve Johnson, commanding the observation post at the edge of human space, was tracking multiple devourer movements. His calculations showed that the creatures were not moving randomly. They were following specific paths that would take them directly to the most populated and technologically advanced systems in the galaxy. The Zalari homeworld would be one of the first targets. Their advanced cities and massive space stations would attract the devourers like magnets. The Korthan Empire's military installations would be next, followed by the Narathi research centers and their vast knowledge databases. Captain Kelly Davis, patrolling near the galactic rim, sent back detailed sensor readings of a devourer that had begun feeding on a dead system. Even lifeless planets were being consumed, their metal cores providing raw material for the creature's growth. If they could destroy dead worlds so easily, living civilizations would have no chance. The reality was becoming clear to everyone in human space. The galaxy faced a threat unlike anything in recorded history. Creatures from the dark void between galaxies were coming to consume everything and everyone. They were perfectly designed for destruction, capable of converting entire worlds into energy for their continued growth. And the civilized species of the galaxy had no idea what was coming toward them. Their long-range sensors were designed to monitor known space lanes and established territories. They were not looking for threats from the empty darkness between spiral arms. Dr. Chris Bennett completed his analysis of the devourer approach patterns. His report confirmed everyone's worst fears. The creatures would reach the first major alien colonies in 14 months, not 18 as originally calculated. They were accelerating as they got closer to sources of matter and energy. The question facing humanity was simple, but difficult. Should they warn the species that had rejected them? Should they risk their own safety to help civilizations that wanted nothing to do with humans? Or should they focus on protecting their own colonies and let the galaxy face its fate alone? Admiral Hayes made the decision that would define humanity's character. Despite the rejection, despite the insults, and dismissal, she ordered the human fleet to prepare warning messages for every major galactic civilization. They would try to save lives, even if those lives belonged to people who considered humans to be dangerous primitives. The galaxy had rejected humanity, calling them too violent for civilized society. Soon that same violence might be the only thing standing between civilization and complete destruction. Admiral Ben Clark stood in the command center of Earth's primary space station, looking at the messages his team had prepared. Each message contained detailed information about the approaching devourer threat. Sensor data, tactical analysis, projected attack routes, and recommended defensive strategies. Everything the alien civilizations would need to prepare for the coming invasion. The decision had been made. Despite being rejected and insulted by every major species in the galaxy, humanity would try to save them. It was not about politics or gaining favor. It was about doing what was right when innocent lives were at stake. Captain Tony Mitchell was chosen to deliver the first warning to the Zalari High Command. His ship, the UES Ambassador, was loaded with detailed sensor readings and scientific analysis prepared by Colonel Nancy Price's Intelligence Division. Tony had studied Zalari culture and language for months. He knew exactly how to present the information in a way they would understand. The journey to Zalari space took 3 days. When Tony's ship arrived at the border, Zalari patrol vessels immediately surrounded him. The alien ships were sleek and beautiful, nothing like the practical human designs, but their weapons were just as deadly. "Human vessel, you are not welcome in Zalari space," came the transmission from the lead patrol ship. "Turn around immediately, or we will escort you out by force." Tony activated his communication system. "This is Captain Mitchell of the United Earth Ship Ambassador. I have urgent information about a threat to your people. Please allow me to speak with your high command. We do not want to hear your lies and deceptions, human. Your kind has already proven they cannot be trusted." Tony tried again. "This is not about politics or diplomacy. Your people are in danger. There are creatures approaching from dark space that will destroy your colonies if you don't prepare." The Zalari captain laughed. "More human fiction. You think you can frighten us into accepting your presence in civilized space. We are not so easily fooled." For 2 hours, Tony tried to convince the Zalari to listen. He offered to transmit the censored data. He offered to leave immediately after delivering the warning. He even offered to surrender himself as a prisoner if they would just examine the evidence. Nothing worked. Finally, the Zalari ships forced Tony's vessel out of their territory. As he left, Tony transmitted all the warning data on open frequencies, hoping someone would receive it and understand the danger. The Zalari jammed the transmissions before they could reach their homeworld. Dr. Helen Brooks tried a different approach with the Narathi. As humanity's top diplomatic advisor, she understood that the Narathi valued scientific accuracy above all else. She prepared her presentation carefully, focusing on hard data and mathematical analysis rather than emotional appeals. Helen's ship arrived at a Narathi research station on the edge of their space. The Narathi were known for their logical minds and careful study of all available information. Helen hoped they would at least examine the evidence before dismissing it. The Narathi response was more polite than the Zalari had been, but equally frustrating. They agreed to study the human data, but only to prove that it was fake. A team of Narathi scientists spent 3 weeks analyzing every detail of the sensor readings and threat projections. Their final report was devastating. The Narathi concluded that the data had been fabricated by humans as part of a complex deception. They claimed that no species as primitive as humanity could have detected threats that their own advanced sensors had missed. Therefore, the entire warning must be a lie designed to trick civilized species into accepting human contact. Your data shows a level of scientific understanding that your species should not possess, the lead Narathi scientist explained to Helen during their final meeting. Either you stole this information from a more advanced species, or you created it to support a false story. In either case, we have no reason to believe your warnings. Helen tried to explain that human science had advanced rapidly in recent decades, but the Narathi had already made up their minds. They escorted her ship out of their space and added humanity to their list of species to avoid. The worst response came from the Korthan Empire. General Vincent Carter had prepared a detailed tactical assessment of devourer capabilities, including specific recommendations for military defense strategies. The Korthan were a warrior culture that respected strength and tactical knowledge. Carter hoped they would at least appreciate the military analysis, even if they distrusted human motives. The Korthan military leadership not only dismissed the warnings, but responded with an official accusation. They claimed that humanity had created the devourer threat as a weapon to use against their neighbors. According to the Korthan, humans were so desperate to gain entry into galactic politics that they had developed biomechanical weapons to terrorize other species. "This is exactly what we expected from your violent species," declared Korthan General Vextar during a broadcast that was transmitted across their empire. "When diplomacy failed, you turned to threats and terror. You probably created these so-called devourers in your laboratories, planning to unleash them on civilized worlds, unless we accept your demands for recognition." The accusation spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Within days, every major species had heard the Korthan theory that humans were behind the devourer threat. Instead of being seen as helpful neighbors trying to provide warnings, humans were now viewed as potential terrorists. Lieutenant Colonel Mary Phillips, stationed at the diplomatic outpost near Zalari space, watched as alien patrol ships began, actively hunting human vessels. Any human ship that entered alien territory was immediately surrounded and forced to leave. Some alien captains were less polite than others. Several human ships were fired upon and damaged while trying to deliver warning messages. Captain Steve Johnson, commanding the Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7, continued tracking the Devourer's approach. His calculations showed they would reach the first major alien colonies in 12 months. The creatures were moving faster than originally projected, accelerating as they got closer to energy sources. Steve transmitted these updates daily to every galactic government he could reach. Each message included more detailed information about devourer behavior and capabilities. He sent tactical recommendations for evacuation procedures and defensive strategies. He even included suggestions for building refugee shelters in case colonies needed to be abandoned. Every single message was blocked before it could reach alien government officials. The galactic species had decided that any communication from humans was either a lie or a threat. Their automated systems were programmed to delete human transmissions without even reading them. Dr. Amy Turner, working from her laboratory on Mars, made a disturbing discovery while analyzing the latest devourer tracking data. The creatures were not just moving toward populated systems randomly. They were following specific paths that would take them to the most technologically advanced civilizations first. The Zalari homeworld, with its massive energy collectors and advanced manufacturing centers, was directly in the path of 3 separate devourers. The Korthan Empire's military shipyards would be hit by at least 5 creatures. The Neruthi research facilities, with their experimental reactors and quantum computers, were attracting more devourers than any other target. Amy realized that the galaxy's most advanced species would be the first to die. Their technology, which they were so proud of, was marking them for destruction. The devourers hunted by following energy signatures, and the most civilized planets were broadcasting their locations like beacons in the darkness. She tried to include this information in the warning messages, but it made no difference. The aliens refused to listen to anything humans said. They had convinced themselves that the entire threat was a human fabrication. Captain Kelly Davis, patrolling the outer edge of human space, detected signs that the devourers were beginning to spread out. Instead of moving in a tight group, they were splitting up to cover more territory. This meant the attack would hit multiple systems simultaneously, making any defense efforts much more difficult. Kelly transmitted her findings to Human Command and tried to relay them to nearby alien colonies. The alien response was swift and hostile. 3 Zalari warships arrived at Kelly's position within hours, demanding that she leave the area immediately. The Devourers arrived 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Captain Kelly Davis was conducting a routine patrol mission near the Galactic Rim when her sensors detected the first attack. Zalari Colony Epsilon 9 was sending out distress signals that cut off abruptly after only a few minutes. Kelly immediately changed course toward the colony. Her ship, the UES Watchman, was not built for combat, but she had to see what was happening. The journey took 6 hours. When she arrived, Kelly found something that would haunt her dreams forever. Zalari Colony Epsilon 9 had been home to 12 million people just hours earlier. Now it was a collection of empty metal shells floating in space. A massive devourer, larger than anything humans had detected before, was wrapped around the colony's main habitat domes. Its tentacles were inserted into the station's hull like feeding tubes. Kelly watched in horror as the creature drained the last bits of energy from the colony's power systems. When it finished feeding, The Devourer released its grip and drifted, away into dark space. Behind it floated the remains of what had once been a thriving civilization. Empty ships, dead space stations, and the frozen bodies of millions of Zalari citizens. Kelly immediately transmitted her findings to Earth Command. Within minutes, Admiral Sandra Hayes was reading the report. The invasion had begun, and it was worse than anyone had predicted. The Devourers were not just consuming matter and energy. They were systematically destroying entire civilizations. Admiral Hayes made a decision that went against every rule of military strategy. Despite the Zalari rejection of human warnings, despite their hostility and accusations, she ordered an immediate rescue mission. The UES Defiant under Captain Roy Adams and the UES Guardian under Captain Julie Morgan were dispatched to search for survivors. The human ships arrived at the destroyed colony within hours. Captain Adams had fought in several military conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw. The Zalari colony had been completely drained of life. The creature had consumed not just the people, but every form of energy in the system. Even the emergency lighting was dark. Dr. Christine Taylor, the fleet's weapons research director, studied the Devourer's feeding patterns from the bridge of the Defiant. Captain, this creature consumed everything except the basic metal structures. It drained the people, the power systems, the computer networks, even the air recycling plants. Captain Adams stared at the floating ruins. Are there any survivors? Scanning now, sir. Dr. Taylor worked her instruments for several minutes. I'm detecting life signs on 3 of the outer habitat modules. Weak signals, but definitely alive. The rescue operation began immediately. Captain Morgan's ship, the Guardian, moved carefully through the debris field while the Defiant provided cover. They found 200,000 Zalari survivors hiding in emergency shelters that had somehow avoided the creature's attention. The survivors were in terrible condition. They had watched their families, friends, and neighbors consumed by something they could not understand or fight. Many were injured. All of them were traumatized and terrified. Commander David Lewis, who served as the human fleet's translator, listened to the survivors' stories. The Zalari described how the Devourer had appeared without warning. Their weapons had been useless against its biomechanical hull. Their shields had failed within minutes. The creature had methodically consumed their entire civilization in less than 6 hours. We sent distress calls to every Zalari military base in the sector, one survivor explained to Lewis. No one came to help us. No one even responded. We thought we were forgotten. Lewis tried to explain that the human ships had come as soon as they detected the attack. The Zalari survivor looked at him with confusion and gratitude. But why? Your people warned us about this threat months ago. We refused to listen. We called you liars and criminals. Why would you risk your lives to save us? Lewis did not have a good answer. He simply said, because it was the right thing to do. The rescue operation took 12 hours. The human ships worked constantly to evacuate survivors to emergency shelters on nearby asteroids. When they finished, Captain Adams received new orders from Admiral Hayes. More Devourer attacks had been detected throughout the galaxy. Human ships were being dispatched to help wherever possible. The news of the rescue spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Captain Ashley Green, monitoring alien communications from her intelligence post, reported a dramatic shift in how other species were talking about humans. The same aliens who had called humans barbaric warmongers were now expressing shock and gratitude. The Korthan Empire faced 3 separate Devourer attacks along their border worlds within the same week. Their proud military, which had boasted about being the strongest force in the galaxy, was completely helpless against the creatures. Korthan warships that could destroy human vessels with ease were consumed like small snacks by the Devourers. After losing 2 entire battle fleets and 4 major colonies, the Korthan government quietly sent a message to Earth. They requested human assistance in evacuating their remaining border settlements. The message was brief and formal, but it represented a complete reversal of their previous position. General Vincent Carter, who had been insulted and dismissed by the Korthan military just months earlier, was chosen to lead the relief mission. He arrived at Korthan space with a mixed fleet of human and volunteer ships from other rescued populations. The Corthan officers who met him were humble and grateful, nothing like the arrogant warriors who had accused humans of creating the devourer threat. The Narathi faced an even worse situation. Their homeworld, with its massive research facilities and experimental energy reactors, had attracted 5 devourers simultaneously. The creatures surrounded the planet like a living cage, feeding on the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Dr. Helen Brooks, who had been rejected by Narathi scientists just months earlier, led the evacuation fleet. When she arrived, she found Narathi research stations being consumed one by one. The logical, analytical species that had called humans intellectually inferior was begging for help from the same people they had dismissed. The Narathi evacuation was the largest rescue operation in human history. Dr. Brooks coordinated 17 ships and over 3,000 rescue workers. They managed to save 8 million Narathi citizens, but the beautiful research planet was lost forever. The creatures consumed every building, every laboratory, and every piece of advanced technology the Narathi had spent centuries developing. Captain Tony Mitchell found himself leading relief efforts for 3 different species simultaneously. His ship carried Zalari refugees to safety while coordinating supply drops for Corthan survivors and providing medical aid to injured Narathi civilians. Just months earlier, these same species had refused to even speak with humans. Now they depended on human generosity for their survival. The transformation in galactic opinion was remarkable. Species that had rejected human friendship were now praising human courage and selflessness. News broadcasts across alien space showed human ships risking destruction to save people who had treated them as enemies. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Rear Admiral, received reports from rescue operations across the galaxy. Human ships were working around the clock to evacuate colonies, provide medical aid, and establish refugee camps. The same humans who had been called too violent for civilized society were sacrificing everything to protect that society. But the devourers were not finished. Intelligence reports showed that more creatures were emerging from dark space. The first wave had been just the beginning of a much larger invasion. Captain Steve Johnson's monitoring station detected at least 60 more devourers approaching the galaxy, each one larger and more powerful than those in the first attack. Dr. Amy Turner, working with rescued alien scientists, made a crucial discovery about devourer behavior. The creatures were not just feeding randomly, they were communicating with each other, sharing information about the most valuable targets. Each successful attack made the remaining devourers more efficient and more dangerous. The galaxy that had rejected humanity was learning a painful lesson. The species they had called barbaric and primitive were the only ones willing to fight, the true barbarism that threatened all life. Human courage and determination were all that stood between civilization and complete destruction. 6 months after the first devourer attack, the galaxy had changed completely. Admiral Ben Clark stood on the bridge of the largest space station ever built, watching ships from dozens of different species working together under human command. The station, called Unity Base, had been constructed from the wreckage of destroyed alien colonies and powered by technology from every rescued civilization. The irony was not lost on anyone. The species that had rejected humanity for being too violent were now following human military leaders in the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, commanded a massive force that included Zalari energy weapons, Corthan armor plating, and Narathi navigation systems, all working together on human-designed ships. The transformation had not been easy. Commander Lisa Grant spent months learning how to coordinate between species that had different languages, different cultures, and different ways of fighting. But the shared experience of being saved by humans had created a bond that crossed all previous boundaries. Dr. Amy Turner worked around the clock with alien scientists to understand the devourer threat. Her research team now included the best minds from every major species. Together, they had discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about the invasion. Admiral Clark, Dr. Turner reported during the morning briefing, "We've analyzed the communication patterns between devourers. They're not just individual creatures hunting for food. They're part of a larger organism, like cells in a body or workers in a hive. Admiral Clark studied the data on his screen. "What does that mean for our defense efforts?" Dr. Turner's expression was grim. "It means there's a central intelligence controlling all of them. We've been fighting the fingers when we need to target the brain." The search for the Devourer Central. Intelligence became the top priority for every scout ship in the combined fleet. Captain Paul Martinez led a team of reconnaissance vessels deep into the galaxy's core, following energy trails and communication signals that might lead to the source of the invasion. After weeks of searching, Martinez made the discovery that would change the course of the war. Hidden in the dense star fields near the galactic center was a creature so massive it defied imagination. The Devourer Queen was larger than most planets, its body surrounded by a swirling cloud of dark energy that bent space and time around it. "This is it," Martinez transmitted to Unity Base. "This thing is coordinating the entire invasion. Every Devourer in the galaxy is connected to it." Dr. Chris Bennett, working with the combined scientific teams, analyzed the sensor data from Martinez's ship. His findings were both encouraging and terrifying. The Queen was indeed the source of the invasion, but destroying it would require more firepower than the combined fleet possessed. "We need to get close enough to target its core," Dr. Bennett explained to the assembled fleet commanders. "But its defensive systems are unlike anything we've seen. The creature can manipulate gravity and space itself to protect its vital organs." Admiral Sandra Hayes, now commanding the largest battle group in galactic history, began planning the assault. She had ships from every rescued species under her command, but coordinating such a diverse force would be incredibly difficult. Zalari ships moved differently than Corthan vessels. Narathi weapons had different targeting systems than human guns. The solution came from an unexpected source. Captain Rick Stone, who had been working with mixed crews since the first rescues, suggested that instead of keeping species separate, they should fully integrate their forces. Human tactical knowledge, alien technology, and combined determination could create something more powerful than any single species could achieve. The integration process took months. Human officers learned to operate Zalari energy systems. Alien engineers adapted their technology to work with human weapon designs. Captain Tony Mitchell found himself commanding a ship where humans, Zalari, Corthan, and Narathi worked side by side at every station. Dr. Helen Brooks led the diplomatic effort to convince the remaining independent species to join the fight. Many smaller civilizations had remained neutral during the early attacks, hoping the Devourers would ignore them. But as the creatures grew larger and more aggressive, even the most isolated planets realized they needed help. The final fleet that assembled for the attack on the Devourer Queen was the most diverse force in galactic history. Over 2,000 ships representing 43 different species, all united under human command and working toward a single goal. The species that had once called humans too violent to join civilized society were now depending on that same capacity for violence to save them all. Captain Jennifer Ross led the advance reconnaissance force that would create the opening for the main attack. Her mixed crew of humans and aliens had trained together for months, learning to work as a single unit despite their different backgrounds and cultures. The battle for the galactic core began at dawn on Unity Base, though time had little meaning in the depths of space. Admiral Hayes gave the order to attack, and 2,000 ships moved as one toward the Devourer Queen. The creature's defenses were beyond anything they had prepared for. Gravity waves tore apart the first wave of attacking ships. Energy beams that could slice through planets destroyed entire squadrons. But the combined fleet kept advancing, each species contributing their unique strengths to the assault. Zalari ships used their energy manipulation technology to create safe corridors through the gravity fields. Corthan vessels, with their heavy armor, pushed through the defensive fire to clear the way for lighter ships. Narathi computers calculated targeting solutions that allowed the human-designed weapons to find weak points in the creature's massive form. Captain Paul Martinez made the decision that turned the tide of the battle. When the main assault force was stopped by the Queen's defensive systems, he volunteered to ram his ship directly into the creature's primary feeding organ. The impact would create a brief opening that other ships could exploit. "This is for everyone," "The Queen is killed," Martinez transmitted as his ship accelerated toward the massive creature. "And for everyone we're going to save." The explosion when Martinez's ship hit the Queen was visible from the edge of the galaxy. The creature's defensive systems faltered for just a few seconds, but that was enough. Captain Jennifer Ross led a strike team directly into the opening, carrying the experimental quantum torpedo that Dr. Helen Brooks's research team had developed. The weapon was unlike anything ever created. It combined human engineering, Zilari energy technology, Corthan metallurgy, and Narathi quantum physics into a single device capable of disrupting the Queen's neural network. When it detonated inside the creature's core, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The Queen's death scream echoed across the galaxy through dimensions that most species could not perceive. Every devourer connected to the creature suddenly stopped moving. Some simply died where they were. Others retreated into the dark space between galaxies, their coordination and purpose gone. In the aftermath of the battle, as the combined fleet returned to Unity Base, Admiral Ben Clark received a message from the newly reformed Galactic Council. The same organization that had rejected humanity 6 months earlier was now offering them permanent leadership of the Galactic Defense Forces. Admiral Clark's response was simple but profound. "We didn't fight to gain power or recognition. We fought because it was right. We'll serve as protectors not because we want to rule, but because someone needs to watch for threats that might come from the darkness." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from every rescued species gathered to formally thank humanity for their sacrifice and leadership. The Zilari, who had called humans barbaric primitives, now praised their courage and wisdom. The Corthan, who had accused humans of creating the threat, formally apologized and offered their eternal loyalty. The Narathi, who had dismissed human intelligence, acknowledged that human leadership had saved them all. Captain Jake Morrison, now Fleet Admiral of the new Galactic Defense Force, established monitoring stations at the edge of the galaxy. Human ships patrolled the dark spaces between stars, watching for any sign that new threats might emerge from the void. The galaxy had rejected humanity, calling them too violent for civilized society. But when true violence threatened everything they held dear, it was human courage and determination that saved them. The same capacity for conflict that had made them unwelcome had become the shield that protected all life. In the end, humanity had found their place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or diplomats, but as guardians. They stood watch at the edge of darkness so that others could live in the light.